based on science and documentation, which if followed, will protect your property, your economical life, and in terms of your holdings, and your bodies from the infringement of misinformed so-called science technology. Non-economic business ventures, which may be part of the plan, although not stated, to acquire by contract land and surreptitious veiled means for as much land control as possible in our town, but also in the United States and countries of the free world. Our study is the result of the commission of the town board. I want to speak a little bit about the boiling controversy of scientific facts and opinions. There is need to differentiate that fact versus opinion. Opinions are anything about anything are usually based on beliefs, attitudes, ideology, personal decisions, feelings, and wants. Since 1988, Al Gore held many old and incorrect opinions on the issue of global warming. He is still in ads. Have you seen them lately? Have you seen Al Gore in ads? It's like, where have you been? What have you been doing? So anyway, touting, the TV ads are touting fear and heat, you know, the hockey stick heat, which we'll talk a little bit more as we go along, and the CO2 catastrophe. The EPA was so influenced by the CO2 global warming theory that the agency created an edict called the Endangerment Findings, stating that CO2 and a mix of a handful of other gases are warming our planet and threatening the public health and welfare of current and future generations. The UN published vast amounts of incorrect data involving something called the hockey stick theory. Does anybody know about the hockey stick theory? Because I can just say quickly what that is. Simply this: we're going along. This is the bottom of the hockey stick. I don't know which way we're going because I'm left-handed. So the hockey stick, we're going along, and all of a sudden, in the next 10 years, we're going to be burned up. And not necessarily burned up, but we will have to have our air conditioning on all the time, and our land will dry up, and we won't have the plants and food we need, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Stating this, let's see. So huge amounts of public money have been poured into this finding. Global warming has now morphed into something they call climate change. Opinions about temperature have been fueled by this controversy. The EPA contributes the public health cause to be, this is going to be ridiculous in your mind, but it's right there in the finding, to motor vehicles and vehicle engines. That should cause you some pause. The question of any opinion statement may get a response like, says who? How do you know this? Which takes us back to the juxtaposition of opinion versus facts. We need to differentiate fact versus opinion. Is it a fact or is it an opinion? The answer is facts can be backed up with data. The scientific method confirms or denies the efficacy of an opinion. Physical evidence validates truth, and scientific method is repeatable I'll just start again. The scientific method by repeatable outcomes is the mode. The science facts create a window into standards. The science is based on concepts of matter, like everything around us, everything about our globe, our earth. So science is facts about the world of matter. Truth comes from the study of matter, and it's how nature works. So this is a fact. Warming and cooling occurs in cycles of about 100 or 1,500 years on average. We get, we base this on lots of studies, but partly you've all heard of the ice core studies, and you can tell some of the ups and downs through these studies, and actually in the history of civilizations, how they come and go, and what happened to them as a result of the change in temperatures. The conclusion is that the UN government and Al Gore were wrong. Every breath you take creates CO2. Bert, you said something about CO2 to me on the phone.
Well, that's why the corn's here. Cornell University a few years ago released this statistic. Every acre of corn takes 18 tons of carbon from the air and releases enough oxygen for 14 adults per year. So you mentioned Al Gore, he's running around talking about trees and everything, but we've got all the farm crops. Every flower, every tree makes oxygen, and the corn is a great producer. So next time you go by a field of corn, say thanks.
And take a deep breath.
It's purifying our air.
Yeah, you probably just go to people by cutting their corn.
Well, I was thinking earlier, most of our land's in the town of Stafford, and they were putting up those things on beautiful land.
We're friends.
I know, but I want to make this point. Look at Town of Stafford. They didn't have a law. They put them everywhere. Beautiful farmland, right up Route 5, and you get sick seeing those beautiful farm fields ruined. And it's a crime. So, on our farm, if we put up a 40-acre one, how many people then we gonna kill, man?
Well, I know we'll try to sell our house, and we won't be able to.
Okay, so that's it for cars.
Some of these cool nights, it's wonderful to go outside and just smell the air. And that's one of the reasons I'm here at Stafford. I had 30 years ago a chance to live wherever I wanted to live. I chose it because this is God's country. It's farmland. It was good people, and that's why I came here.
That's great.
The CO2 is coming from the ocean. The bulk of it comes from the ocean, and I just like I have an engineering background, but I'm a practical guy. Right now they're
He's an
talking
environmental engineer.
Well, along with I had 3 disciplines. My main forte was environmental engineering. Right now they're talking about sharks in our waters. Be careful, go fishing, be careful, don't put your hand in the water, don't go swimming. And why is that, do you think? Because the ocean is cleaning itself. The ocean is cleaning itself.
And
the CO2 spike that we had is because the ocean was dirty. And we helped the ocean clean itself. And we're seeing the ocean is becoming productive. And because the bait fish are on shore, the sharks were out 40 miles, 50 miles. And now they're inshore because it's clean. So
and
you're going to see the CO2
fish
come down because that's where the CO2 is coming from. Man has very little influence.
Okay, so I'm going to begin again, and thank you for that comment. CO2 makes our earth green and verdant. CO2 is not a problem. Facts come from hypothesis testing, and the question would be, how did the EPA miss this important information? Well, the UN and the IPCC, which is the International Policy on Climate Change, created it. It was the errors and disregard for facts that allowed the government to put forth the mistake of climate change. Why would they disregard the facts? Again, a word about facts. A fact is a proven truth. It is how scientific method works. You ask a question, you do background research on a topic to see what is already known. You construct a hypothesis, you test by experimenting, you analyze the data, you communicate the results, and some studies are harder than others. and some studies have to be redone again. The scientific method's job is to discover cause and effect relationships by asking questions, gathering and examining evidence, and seeing if the information can combine and become logical answers. Then, new information and thinking might cause it a necessity to go back and repeat the steps of the process, and then you keep working through your observations and data to answer the questions. I believe that none of this has been accomplished by the UN, by the IPCC, and we also have not done much to further this understanding, and there's a lot of new information since we put out our study. So, you keep working through your observations and data and get closer to the answers to your questions. Scientists from all over the world have been looking at and studying the endangerment finding based on new conclusions and studies coming out of new information, simply because scientists are publishing their latest results. You won't believe this, but 3,800,000 reconsideration petitions were advanced to debunk the EPA endangerment findings, but they did not convince the court to overturn. You have to ask, why did that happen? Why did the court not even take a look at or set up a panel to look at the new information? 3,800,000, is that what I said? I'm thinking it's correct. That means that a lot of scientific groups, a lot of corporations that were doing studies, and a lot of PhD type retired guys. One of the reasons we have advanced the information so with such, what is the word I'm looking for? One of the reasons we've advanced all of this information and the conclusions in the last 4 years is because a lot of these guys who are working on this information have retired, and they've looked at this and they say, this is ridiculous, this is wrong, this can't be. CO2 is known to be a producer of the verdant world. So you have to ask, why did they convince the court to overturn? And why did the court overturn and lead the endangerment finding that CO2 is a danger to humanity and to all living things? 20 years of study proving we simply have climate change cycles and it's not doomsday. Still, our government, the UN, and commercial businesses of wind, solar, and battery installation companies are being pushed forward by proponents of the companies looking to prosper by renting out farmland for 20 to 40-year contracts, which will be flipped and sold to the next investor. There's more and more evidence in the last year that some solar and wind companies have their origin in China. So I don't want to get into that too much, but I want to say something about our company, the company that's planning to come here, would like to come here. Unfortunately, this may be the case with BW Solar. The salesman is from Rochester. He says the company is based in Ontario, Canada. However, further studies on BW Solar show it to be a subsidiary of a company called the BW Group. I didn't count up how many subsidiaries of BW Group there are, but there were at least 60 to 80, and they all start with BW. And so this BW Group is from Singapore and Norway. The extent of their holdings penetrate into global hold on huge basic sources of commerce throughout the world. They're a shipping magnet company, and they have everything that has to do with controlling commerce. It's very interesting. So why is China interested in our farmland? Why are farmers renting or selling farmland to foreign countries? Well, I don't think they really know, particularly that that's what they're doing. Who in Stafford wishes to divest their holdings, their farmland, to foreign countries, and why would they? This is mostly known and understood as a land grab by another country. But why? Why is there a land grab from other countries, especially that huge country I just mentioned that may be a part of what's going on? And why would farmers not understand the long-term consequences of their communities and fellow American citizens, to their communities and fellow American citizens? The facts include short versus long-term thinking, disregard for communities, their own communities, misunderstanding of the laws of the land, misunderstanding of our American freedoms and our Constitution, which if followed would preserve our precious way of life for ourselves and future generations. Facts must be followed. Facts follow evidence. The Stafford Committee is based on facts, and now we will quickly go over part one of the solar study. I've been told that most of the people on the boards of appeals and planning board of Stafford have not read the solar report. Some have read the law. And with that, I want to, we weren't taking any questions this evening, so I'll just continue by going through the law. And then, excuse me, going through the book. This is book 1 of 2.
Do you want me to go over the law? Or?
And I thought you would go, would you like to go over the law now?
Yeah, because
Very good, that follows fine.
as you go over things. All right, so the solar study finished up their work around mid-2018, and we went to work trying to pull together a law that covered what was found. Naturally, as a small community, we're not going to get into the large generalities. We get into the specific issues. So we finished it up. What we did is we came up with a draft. The draft was based on a law out of North Carolina. When we looked across to see what kind of samples there were, theirs came up with quite a few of the features that we were looking for. Don't forget when you try to come up with something this expensive, the original I think was 30 to 35 pages, and then we cut it down to 18. Using a model, just like the U.S. Constitution, it's basically 5 documents it's based on. So that's how you come up with a quality law. We did have some goals that we wanted to set. So we took the law, we modified it to what we thought fit Stafford. Then we did a series of workshops where the entire board went line by line through the law to see if we agreed with what it had or not. One of the big changes we made, it originally was 30 pages long because we took a lot of the results of the study group and tried to legislate some type of protection from them. Our attorney gave us the advice that, well, New York, the source where your law was from doesn't have a strong seeker process, whereas New York does. Seeker, do you remember what the exact letters were for it?
The State Employer Mental Law Review Act.
Thank you. Seeker is a form of failure mode analysis. So you're looking to see, we're going to go ahead with a certain function or a certain law or allow a certain thing to happen. What are the failure modes that can occur? A lot of times they're looking for historic issues, environmental issues, and we try to make sure that we have captured all of the items. Now, normally, the board will do a short form seeker within the length of a meeting. So that would go on for a couple hours. We'll answer the questions and go from there. What I'm hoping, and I asked, I don't know, it was over a year ago, if the study committee would participate in the seeker. Now, Steve, one of the things we'll be looking at from you is, as we go over, if you've been through a failure mode analysis, you know you start with what some of the problems can be, and then you assess, are they likely, how bad are they if they occur, and then what should be your mitigation. And that's what we would want to be looking for from any points that come out of the study group. And I think that way we can have a high-quality seeker. But, Bob, I don't think we're going to get it done in 2 hours, and we're probably going to have to do some separate workshops if we're going to do that. So that I think was a good upgrade to the law, in that, let's face it, the study group finished up in 2018. We went through the law through 2018 and into 2019, passed it on June 10th of 2019, and here it's already 222 before we're actually using it. So I think that was a good way to go, and it makes the seeker very important. And that's the main link I wanted to show from tonight, is the link from the study group to developing a good seeker, and then deciding whether issues should be raised or not based on the seeker. So you may want, I know you guys gave estimates on what you thought the amount of what the funding would need to be to go through our application. Please take into account that we want to do a thorough seeker. So I guess the best thing I want to tell everybody, based on the law, you're going to have 2 swings at the bat. You're going to have where the study committee will go over what some of their findings were, and that's a precursor to the seeker. And then as we go through the seeker, I want to make sure that we cover those items. I guess a good way to put it, that I have seen failure mode analysis for National Safety Board parts or flight safety parts that can go as high as 1,200 pages. I don't think we're going to reach that level, but I think we will at least produce about 10. So
More than that.
yeah, probably. So that's where we're going there. Now, the main parts of the law are we require a permit. This is not just something you can come in and build without a permit. So we require a permit. We require a maintenance plan. We require a decommissioning plan. We require that as we go through the process of approval, that we take into account the environmental, the economic impacts that can affect our town. We have one section where it's a property guarantee program, where we wanted to, we had already seen the preliminary maps out of Byron, and I've made no secret that the property protection plan was to make sure we don't have the situation that you have going on there, where because of the size of it, it's no longer a local issue. It's a state-run approval process for Byron and a lot of the towns along along the high tension lines. But the thing is you were getting people that were getting boxed in by solar. So if they were a non-participant, and if they look out their front door, back door, side door, from either side, they're going to see solar panels. That's the magnitude of what we're seeing. Stafford, on the other hand, we have some commercial and industrial property. We have what makes sense about our laws. That's where the power lines usually run to. And this industry is dependent on power lines. They don't build their own. They use what's there. So the property protection plan was to control the results. The solar company has objected to that part of the law. That's probably the most controversial part right now. That's not something we're going to dive into here, but it has been discussed at the board meetings. How much deeper do we want to go? I've covered the highlights. I've covered what our intent was. Do you want me to go any deeper than that, or is everybody comfortable with the background of it?
Well, people are always asking me, setback, how close can it be to my house? How close, you know? And so I was waiting for you to get to that.
There are setbacks, but don't forget, like all zoning laws, setbacks are not an absolute. So there have been some.
Okay, if it's allowed, why is it an absolute?
Right.
Because it's zoning.
Because it's zoning.
Because it's zoning.
So why do we have the law? Why don't we have a zoning?
All right. Why do we have a zoning law where you have to have a building a certain distance from the property line? But we allow deviations from that.
So all this work we did, because just went to the zoning guy and said, let's do this. So you're supposed to protect us.
Yes.
The setback was important to us, and we put it into the law. And now
Or recommend.
they're going to allow that to be changed?
Yes.
They are.
No, they already have.
They already have.
What's it?
I find that quite interesting.
Well, look at it this way. Congress can pass a law. So the judicial branch, which is very similar to our zoning board of appeals, can interpret that law.
The way I interpret the law tells us that we're all equal. That she's blindfolded, and if we have to look at this with the law, we'll challenge it. We'll challenge the zone with the law, if that's what we have to do, because this is crap. That's crap.
That's how zoning works.
That's how it works. So fine. Well, they got the set of rules. We'll talk about the rules, and we'll see who's going to win. We'll go rule for rule. Okay?
No, I just...
Fine. I can't believe it. You people didn't allow us to know that. You're supposed to protect us. I can't believe it. I cannot believe it.
I didn't allow you to know that setbacks
It's already done, you said. Does anyone here know that this happened?
Yeah, it happened in May at the zoning,
It did?
at the zoning
Okay.
meeting.
Well,
I was there.
There's one out of,
I was there.
Good question. So is the town board
Sandy,
going to stand
we'll have a
behind the
meeting,
laws
okay?
that you have made?
We have.
Could you
Are
repeat
will
that
you
question, please?
Pardon me?
Could you repeat the question?
Is the town board going to stand behind the laws that you constructed for solar?
Yes, but there will be decisions coming up. Will we fund litigation if it comes to that?
I understand that there was some money put aside to do that, right? There was money put aside for litigation, or lawyer or whatever, for the this solar thing?
Our budget right now is what, about 10,000 for legal expenses? We'll have to draw out of our reserve if we get into a large legal issue.
We haven't changed any setbacks, the town board hasn't. We haven't changed anything in this law.
So the town board is your boss?
Huh?
They are the town board. There's a town board, there's a planning board, and there's a zoning board of appeals. It sounds like what they did was they went to the zoning board of appeals and asked for a variance.
Yes.
The zoning
Who
board
did,
of
though?
appeals allowed that
The
variance.
company.
The developer.
PW Solar did.
There's a process in place so that the zoning board can make a determination whether or not they'll give them that setback. And they determined based off of what the request was that they wanted to approve their variances. Now, it's up to the town to go through their due diligence, and that's where we're at. It doesn't mean that we're gonna have solar here. It just means that they approved the variance so that they could build based off of what their requirements were for their project to be successful. So,
Right now, the only place where you can have any kind of a solar array is in an industrial area, which is over by the town line, Byron Road, Batavia Stafford Town Line Road. That's the only place right now. And there's some hang-ups about that regarding setbacks.
Batavia Stafford on past 33 or our side?
Come by the college.
The other side of the college.
By the end of the college road, you drive right across the road there, you'll
Right.
be in the middle of it.
Right, okay.
So if you allow one solar company in, what's going to stop more companies coming in? Now change the laws and change the rules and change the
Right.
regulations.
Well, they'll have to change, there's another company that wants to put solar
Yeah, I know.
out here east, but the property is not zoned for that. The first thing they gotta do is change the zoning. And I'm saying they aren't gonna change the zoning, they're gonna want us to change the zoning. Or whatever board, but I mean, as far as the town board is concerned, I don't think that's gonna happen. And we may end up in court over it. And so be it. I guess it's worth it. I mean, we've gone to court for a lot lesser things. If we can preserve the town as close to the way it is now, why, it'll be worth a day or two in court, I think.
You're right.
Right.
And so does everyone understand how this happened and the misunderstandings that have come up? Because just because you have a law doesn't mean there.
Well, it's especially zoning, because to get zoning through, they had to make it quite accommodating to landowners who had previously been able to do whatever they want to their land.
And the interesting thing about that whole point that you just made is that most people in America think they have the rights to do what they want with their land.
Well, there's some things you can do by right with your land, and there's some things you have to get a permit or get a zoning variance to be able to do. And that's so that not everybody owns all the land. You have various interests coming up in between, and that's how zoning works. I think that the type of zoning we do here is basically like things together. So as a board, when we looked at what the solar equipment and all that went along with it was, we thought it was more akin to our industrial zoning than to our agricultural zoning. So that's how we ended up having it on industrial property. And again, it's a good match because that's usually where your power is.
I'm still confused. I'm sorry. We have a 5-person elected board. The they're elected by the people, and you are paid for doing your job. And you've done a great job through the years, no question. So, Supervisor Matt, back when solar was starting 5 years ago, you know, he suggested a study committee. So we had a study committee. Okay, that's great. Well, I know we have a planning board, and we have a zoning board, and
We
these,
have a zoning officer.
but these people you appoint these people.
Well, what I did, I appointed the chairman of this, of the committee as Sandy Swanson.
Right.
Because I knew over previous working with her that she would not leave a stone unturned.
Right, like,
And she didn't.
like that's what I was.
That's why we've got this and another one look like it.
I was at the meeting and you suggested we should have a committee, and you appointed Sandy and you're on the committee. Okay, so that takes me down to the planning board, the zoning board. You people nominate people, or they apply to be on these boards, planning board. But I didn't think that they had any power per se. They make recommendations, just the way our study committee, we just presented the facts. I thought the planning board listened to people and present you you have the final vote. So I have heard or understand here tonight that the zoning board changed the town's law.
No, they allowed a deviation to it.
The
So
thing
what
is,
does that mean?
the thing is that
What does a deviation mean?
It means that you can construct within the deviated setbacks.
Which is different from what the law says.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I thought the deviation had to be approved by the board.
it doesn't, but
No.
the thing is,
So
that nobody,
why did we put it in there in the first place?
We have setbacks in there.
Yeah, what are they?
Well,
I can look them up.
Yeah.
Ernie, specifically, what are you referring to? Somebody's made a change. What change did they make? Allegedly.
allegedly, something about setbacks, something
I was
about.
talking about the zoning board of appeals approved a variance.
Yeah.
Right.
For an individual, but not for the whole town.
Right.
Somebody went before the zoning board of appeals, and they wanted to change a setback maybe pertaining to them personally.
And do you
But
know
the
what
fact
that was?
that, I don't know what that was, but if that was changed for some individual, that's one thing. But that doesn't mean the whole law is changed.
And when they do that, they have to prove a hardship, so, there it is challenged, can be challenged legally if that hardship is.
Probably the best example was where our setbacks would apply on separate properties owned by the same person. So would you force that person to merge those properties together? Or do you just provide a variance that recognizes they own parcel A and parcel B, and they're all under the same ownership, and the setbacks really should apply only to the outside boundaries where it intersects with other people's property?
So because this is the industrial zone, you can stipulate that the Board of Appeals had the right and exclusive.
No, it's not because it's industrial. It's because of the way the town law sets us up, where we have a town board, planning board, and zoning board of appeals. The best way I can describe it is where if you compare it to the U.S. government, the people you're looking at now are the legislative and executive branch. The planning board is the bureaucracy who makes recommendations. The zoning board of appeals is like the court system, where you think the law has aggrieved you. You go to the zoning board of appeals, and for your particular circumstances, they can make a ruling that says the intent of they can't change. There's a lot of the law they can't change, but they can modify those items where it makes sense and where a hardship is proven. So again, you can take a single property owner where we have setback rules, but on that individual piece of property, it may make more sense for everyone, them and their neighbors included, to modify the setbacks to allow it to go forward
And are the
in that way.
Are the neighbors notified?
Yes.
So they all have to say, yeah, that's okay, we don't care.
No, they're notified of the process.
People could have joined that zoning meeting. There were only like 4 people in the meeting, 5 people. So maybe you didn't know about it,
No, we didn't.
and I kind of blame the town a little bit about that because they don't post things so that everybody can see it and get it.
We
I
don't
think
get
it
the
should be
same
more public.
penny saver.
Oh, it wasn't in the penny saver, that one. It goes on the town website, out on the bulletin board, and in the daily news in the legal section.
2,500 feet.
the only
of, highway.
Legal place they have to post it.
No, no, no.
Any changes to your close neighbor that has to go through the zoning board? The neighbor's supposed to receive a letter?
Yes, what is it, 500 feet?
It's 3 to 5.
So
As
they
far
should go-
as far as the subject that we're talking about is solar, that's on the town board. There are certain items that don't go before these other boards. They're regarded as being more important, I guess. So the solar business is strictly in the laps of the town board.
And in the same way that you would, if you're going to build a house on a lot, you're not going to get it approved at the town board level. You're going to get it approved at the planning board level. Or I use the example of a house, that even goes down just to the code enforcement officer. This one comes all the way up to us.
Yeah.
But you still have to follow the law on allowing people to appeal these items through the zoning board of appeals.
And do we understand that this doesn't extrapolate to all other
No.
applications?
But if you have to be careful. If you allow it for one, everybody knows
In the
everybody's
industrial
business. If somebody wants to put one, say, in the other industrial zone, and they would look for similar treatment there that the zoning board of appeals gave to BW.
So we have 2 industrial zones, is that correct?
Yes.
And so the other industrial zone is on Main Street, across from the quarry.
Stone quarry property.
Yes. Or the Stone Quarry property.
Oh,
And they are unlikely to develop because of their business. So that's kind of off the table as being a problem as we go forward.
I have no idea.
I don't think that.
I know if in any place else, it will take a change of zoning to put them anyplace else, which then makes it subject to our comprehensive plan.
I think a lot of people were shocked that the zoning board approved the variances.
I was going to say, who has the final say on whether this gets approved or not? Is it the town board, because it's been passed from the zoning board onto the town board? Does the town board have the final say as to yes
We
or
have the
no?
final say on the application.
So the purpose of the meeting this evening was to actually go over the part 1 of the study, and we've jumped right to the heart of what everyone is worried about. And we will be having Steve Tanner help us with the seeker, and he understands seekers like this, and the ins and outs of dealing with, helping the town, how do I say it? Stay to the law as it was intended.
Yeah, and just for full disclosure, there's other towns I work in that want solar. We
Yes.
help them
Yes,
stick to their law.
absolutely. Yeah.
I've read your law, we'll make them stick to your law.
All right.
That's
my
right.
job.
Now, the question was, who has the final approval? If the company follows all the requirements of our law, then what choice would we have to approve it? If no risks are shown, if they comply to our law, they'll be approved.
Is that with the variant
I don't
then?
think so.
What's that?
With the variant?
The variances simply are where within the industrial zone it is placed. There is no variance for putting it outside an industrial zone, nor can they do a variance like that.
But that's a farm.
You could do a special use permit, I
It's a
imagine.
farm.
Then that's subject to town board approval. But realize that we did not ban them. If you know, and reading the crowd here, everybody would say, well, why don't you just ban them? We don't want them. That's a surefire way to go to litigation. And part of the problem is when you go to litigation and you lose, if you simply ban them, then you have nothing. You have no protections whatsoever.
So as far as I see, what we've done right now is we've skipped over the information, but I think this is very important. I think you have allayed a lot of the fears that people have, because the buck stops at the town board. And it sounds to me as though the town board is not amenable, if at all possible, to let this go through. But we have to be careful. We have to be diligent.
Our law is basically our statement of how amenable we are.
What is
You agree?
rooftop solar?
Rooftop solar is apart from what we're talking about this evening.
What is the big problem with what is now? They want a change. For what reason? Isn't it big enough for what the purpose is?
Setbacks for the regular.
Is
all
it too
of
much?
us
Is it so much that it affects their profit or something?
It wouldn't have been profitable for them to build a project
No.
based off of what was given to them. So they applied for the variance so that they can maximize the opportunity for their project.
Make a
Very well put.
bigger project on a small piece of land.
It is what it is.
Right?
That's because someone was approached and they said, we would like your land, right? And someone had to say, is that how it worked?
I don't
Okay.
know how it works.
Okay.
Part of their argument for their variance was that they would be able to position the solar farm on those parcels in the industrial zone, farther away from other houses, by not having to have that big buffer zone in between the parcels. So they're,
And do they own that anyway?
they own both parcels.
Yeah.
The issue is that the variance allows them to build so that people can see the product, right? If you drive through Batavia, and I'm fairly new here, you see all these solar farms, they're an eyesore. And, this is agricultural. That's why most of us moved here because we want to be in that environment. I don't want to drive down the road and see a solar farm every 20 feet. And that's what it's coming up to be.
Well, then don't drive through any of the northern towns in Genesee County, because we're talking thousands.
It's going to make Town of Batavia look silly.
It's a
Small, but it's a huge solar farm.
Oakfield and,
But we kind of got to eat in the future too,
Okay, is that,
shouldn't waste time with this,
You're
but,
not wasting the time, but
well,
you
no,
need
Ron already
confirmation.
mentioned the mess environment, you know, where people are getting surrounded, whatever. Did they have a law, did they have any regulations for, 1,000 feet, whatever?
Over a certain size, the state handles it all.
Okay.
Could the state do that too? I don't know this answer, because could the state do that to the town of Stafford?
I couldn't get the list.
No, because what's being applied for is not
It's not big enough, right?
big enough.
Right, but I'm just saying, if someone came in here with a development like what's in Byron into the town of Stafford, the state could overrule you?
If it's over 20 to 25 megawatts, yes.
Yes.
This one's
That's
only
scary.
2.5
That's
megawatts.
just scary.
And the one that they're applying for, or they haven't applied for, they have shown interest in, is right on that borderline.
I think the issue the town and the people in this town need to realize is that at some point or another, it could go to court, right? And how much effort and money do you want the town to spend in order to litigate something like this? Because our taxes just went up this year. I mean, I started attending these meetings and then I decided I wasn't coming anymore because I didn't think it was worth voicing my opinion. But there's still not enough people from the town here for this meeting. So until you people, and I don't mean you people, but until we start spreading the word that, and let people know that we don't want this, the next decision is how far do you want to go with it, right? Do you want to get lawyers involved? Do you want to spend more money to fight this? Because that's what it's going to come down to, right? Let's face
Do you
it.
have an opinion on that question?
Well, my opinion is that we should fight it
My
because,
opinion is the same.
you know,
We
because
must fight
You
it.
have to.
I don't think that the people of this town have had a voice yet. And some of it's their own fault, but some of it's, I believe, the town's fault. There needs to be mailers sent out to people so that they can get the word, so that they know that they have the opportunity to come in and sit on these meetings. I mean, if we don't spread the word internally throughout the neighbors and the people, and let everybody know that this is going to cost money, it's going to hit us.
It has to cost a lot of money in order to keep the life that we have now and the roads and the view sheds that we have now.
If the town bylaws state that this is an agricultural community, and we have one little area that's zoned industrial, or maybe two, but one that they can build on, I mean, I just think that you need to make, the best choice for you personally, but the word needs to be spread out there.
Don't forget, we're not supposed to take on an advocacy role for one side or another.
Completely understand that, but the town has to have a voice at some point. I
The
live here.
the town speak to the board members, so the board members speak for the citizens of the town, as I understand it. Is that
They do,
correct?
but in previous meetings, we're told not to ask questions. And this is a forum that we're probably not supposed to be doing right now, but I think people have to voice their opinions so that the town understands where we stand and how far we're willing to go.
Are you Howard?
I'm Harold.
Harold, excuse me. What I would like to say is, I'd like to go through the parts of the book that lay the information that backs up your attitude and should back up the attitude of all of the people in the town having to do with whether or not we should knuckle under to these companies that are coming. Now, in my opening statements, I mentioned trying to be very careful that these companies are for profit. They are not necessarily for local profit. Did I make that clear? That this is possibly international profit. This is possibly a land grab for companies. It's a total plan having to do with controlling land.
The thing is, when will the town, the people in this town, be able to express their opinion? At what point, at what
We
stage
have other
during this
meetings that-
process?
I just thought it would be better for me to go through this book tonight, and we wouldn't ask for questions. We could just be here, but you know, it doesn't really work that well, does it? I would like to go through this information and show you that we thoroughly have studied almost every aspect of the problem. We haven't ever studied why people won't come to the town meetings, but TV and the internet and phones have everything to do with it. And also, I'm sorry to say it like this, but I do feel that people under 30 and even under 40 are very prone to being uninterested in the community and are very focused on their little world of their own friends and their communications that don't involve emotion and don't hook their brain and their emotions together to get intuition about a life the way it could be. We could be having such a much happier life if we were working together. And that's the way it used to be. It was that way when you and I were growing up. What happened at our church?
A lot's changed. I think people don't realize this sets precedent. You may not be in your backyard, but it sets a precedent.
It absolutely sets a precedent. The point I was trying to make is 50 years ago, we went to church suppers every 2 weeks on Thursdays. Pardon?
Lenten suppers.
Lenten suppers and suppers. And
From-
there was community.
From the flip side, as a board, we have to navigate between what the desires of people are and what the reality of development is. And again, our law reflects what our opinion was. If you look at our comprehensive plan, it says that we're supposed to protect farmland. By virtue of those being in industrial zones, that is no longer farmland to be protected. We have made the statement we are going to allow development in these zones of like industries. Now, let's say you're saying, well, if you put it in the industrial zone, it's going to open the door to a flood of solar farms in Stafford. Is that the logic that I'm hearing?
Yep, not completely. There's two industrial areas within Stafford, and one is the quarry, right? So there's only a limited amount of space that people can do that with, but they can certainly, a larger project could then force the town to adopt another area for industrial space.
A larger project, we're out of it.
That's taking enforceability.
We are out of it. We can beg for crumbs from them, but we are out of it. That's what you're seeing in the northern towns. We simply do not have the capacity, and the developers don't build lines. They take advantage of what lines there are.
So the lines are going up through Byron and Virgin
Oh, you've got
into Batavia.
Yeah, you've got your big lines there. They can handle that type of capacity. We really don't have it here. And the other thing about this is that once somebody captures the capacity of those lines, that capacity is gone. So it's not like you build a solar farm here and then build another one along the same lines. If they filled up the capacity, that's it. So then you either build new capacity or not. But again, through our law, we made the statement that we are not going to ban them completely, because that's a sure way to litigation. That we consider the the standard of zoning where you put like things together. I think it's called Cincinnati style zoning, or it's named after a city, where you put like things in zones. And we decided that the industrial zone should be where we would allow this. Now, somebody can't come in and say, well, you won't allow solar farms at all. No, we allow them in industrial zones based on
Based
this
on
part of our law.
variance, so, right? I can understand it. I just hope that the law has not been changed. Because then the law is, a farmer can get the same variance that the industrial zone gets.
Well, actually, when you look at it, there's a lot of things a farmer can do that he doesn't even have to get in a variance for
Or he doesn't have to follow the law.
because our laws are subject to the ag and market laws of New York State. Remember, it's not where towns build into counties and build into states. The state has absolute power over us. We do it by town law that's issued by the state.
I said, well, the law will talk to the law. Remember Dennis Farco?
Yes, I want to talk.
He was, the end of my career, I worked in the law department, so I have a little understanding. Dennis Farco was unbelievable, and he knows about leasing and zoning and da-da-da. We'll talk.
Okay, now,
What?
I called a meeting to go over the
We
part
gotta
one.
get into the specifics.
I have a husband who's in a
Yes.
hospital bed.
Can I go look at the map?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Well, would anyone else like to go look at the map so they understand?
That's what I'm curious about.
Why don't I just bring the map back?
Oh, wait a second.
You know, okay.
Ron, while you're walking, how long has that land been, industrial zone, industrial?
Do you remember?
Maybe Buffalo.
The dates on the map.
Oh, okay.
But don't forget, a while back, you had the state was going to do all kinds of funding for industries that worked in conjunction with community colleges.
Right.
What's right across the street?
Sure.
A community college.
Right.
Has anybody ever checked to see what these farmers are getting paid to rent these things? I was up in a friend of mine's got a place in Medina where they're doing that. They're getting between $1,000 and $1,100 an acre per month. They're getting paid. So if they're gonna lease out 50 acres, they're getting $50,000 a month. And they claim they're still gonna farm. Well, if I was making $50,000 a month at my age, I wouldn't be doing any farming. I'd be somewhere out on the beach. So, take it for what it's worth.
Sometimes if it's too good to be true, it probably
It's too good to be true.
Okay, even though Ron is going to bring the map back.
He's renting his land out for $1,100 a month.
Whoa, let's get back to business here.
I think Sandy mentioned you they're talking about the monster one behind your house, and I don't know if I never give a birth card or anything like that. Farm up on the Davis Stafford Town Hall, just off the road down there. And I understand exactly what she mentioned, that she
This is the one that was updated for the commercial zones on file, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just gonna put it on the table over there.
Yeah, like,
Well, okay. So you
Well-
look at that.
I'll show everybody, and then you can come up and examine it. There are two industrial zones. We have an industrial zone and an industrial park zone. And both of them, per our law, can host a solar farm. Here,
with a variance on the setback.
yes, they're allowed to look for variances, but if you try to put
Green area.
something that you're not zoned for. Let's do a simpler example. Let's say you want to put a commercial business in your home. We allow special use permits.
I agree that, one size don't fit all, but there
Yes.
should be.
Ron, the red ones are the commercial in the town, correct?
The red are the commercial, the green is ag, The yellow is Hamlet, I think it's called.
Single-family residential.
That's for single
Is that
family.
Single-family residential.
Yeah,
Legends
the
up
gamut
top.
of,
And then the residential is the yellow.
yeah.
Well,
So,
How often is that updated?
when we update
It was
this.
updated last in July 12, 2021.
No.
That's what it says.
this is 2003.
We just received this the other day.
So,
with the
so,
new,
my question
Oh,
is,
yeah.
It says that. We just got this
The
the other day.
date's right on it, something.
so
Yeah, he said 21.
at one point, was
It's
there
not
more
right, because
industrial?
we just got
With
that.
the old one.
What's that?
At one point, was there more industrial? Because I noticed on this old map of 2003, there were some other purple areas that aren't on that map.
Was purple industrial at the
No, it's
time.
right there.
It-
July
Yeah, well, according to this map, it
Well,
was.
this it was.
Yeah, so
Steve.
So I'm looking at these areas here.
Does it?
Doesn't
I didn't see
look
it.
like it. So I'm wondering
Right there at
if
the
something
top.
has to change, right?
And the other
this
side.
is the comprehensive plan.
That's great.
It's not, yeah, but it's not the zoning map.
It's not the zoning map. What's the difference? Because this says existing.
Because that's what it says, adopted. It had the adoption
New
dates.
local law.
Again,
That's what we got.
yeah, this is per the law, that is per the plan.
That came with the, 5 or 6 years ago.
So a good example, let's find 237
It's
here.
hanging up in a boardroom, the one previous to this.
But this is the true one.
It's in right around here.
Oh, okay.
We haven't got it put up yet.
So if you recall,
Finish the local law.
the comprehensive, Crockers wanted to go to commercial.
That's it.
There's no commercial even planned on 237. Consequently, we couldn't pass their application.
So that whole,
Okay.
This is why we have two meetings.
put down more,
Can I have everybody's attention, please? Can I have everybody's attention, please? Now, the purpose of this meeting was to go over what the law, or what the study committee actually said. And of course, we're getting the idea right now that it doesn't really matter what the study committee said. But it really does matter what the study committee said, because the law was made off that, and then we didn't really, well, I do have a section on New York State law. New York State law is quite fear-producing because of its overreaching powers into our personal lives. But if you know, we have another meeting coming up next Tuesday night for the same purpose, only part 2 of the study. What I'd like to tell you is that we had many very important people coming to speak to us over the time of that 2 years, and I want to tell you about who they were. And I need to get your permission to go ahead with this right now instead of furthering our concern about the zoning. Because we have New York State zoning, we have county, and we have the town zoning. I believe that the people at this table probably don't want solar farms in that sector that bounds by Maine, Buckley, Prentice, and 237. I believe that, but I do not know that. There are some very powerful people that own land in that sector. The country club is, how would I say this? The country club is very upset about it. But like all communities, people are not coming out to take their rights of speech and put their cards on the table. It would be quite a horrible thing if that sector was solarized. It would be very bad, and this study shows why. This study has to do with the things that we would have to take into consideration in saying yes to solar if we had the right in New York State to say yes to solar. So with your permission, I'd like to go ahead because I just sent my sister home to stay with my husband, and so I think I can stay for another 45 minutes and then I will have to leave. I want to acknowledge the speakers that we had over that 2-year period that we did the study. I don't know if you guys know Matt McCampbell, who used to be the CEO of Owaka Milk, and he was also on the NYSERDA board, and he knew from inside out what was going on with NYSERDA, and he really disagreed with what they were doing, but he had lots of information for us. No information on how to get around any of it. Very concerned with the state control. Matt Brower of New York State Ag and Markets, soil specialist. This guy was absolutely one of the best soil specialists that they ever had that worked our territory. And he retired early because he was sickened by what was going on in the state with the agricultural land versus the influx of the solar, and it was not just solar, but it was some of the other things that came before. And Mike Saviola was also from Ag and Markets. They're all, of course, against the soil being harmed. Say the microorganisms were going to be harmed, and they were very aware of what electromagnetic energy does to soil, and also how electromagnetic energy travels from place to place by the path of least resistance. And then we had, as Lenny said, Dennis Vaco, there were 2 things he was doing. First of all, he was giving this fabulous talk about this is the way it goes. I was thinking of doing it. I could have made a lot of money, but I really don't agree with it. I agree with doing something with law. And secondarily, he said, and you can contact our law firm and have help from our law firm, you know. So he was giving these great talks.
Oh, I didn't
Go ahead.
I didn't know if you were through yet with him. No. What was he previously? He was
He's a lawyer.
yeah, but he has state.
He hasn't been here.
He was the
What was his state job?
I
district
don't
attorney,
remember.
the state district attorney, wasn't he?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, he was very famous. He was a wonderful speaker.
But his family are large farmers. They have a lot of vegetables and vineyards and
Vineyards.
Yeah,
Vineyards,
well,
down below Buffalo.
he was
Extremely
very
knowledgeable.
impressive.
And he warned everybody about their contracts and to get a lawyer to go with you before you sign a contract. And then we had Dave Stetzer, who came from, not Michigan. Can't remember if it's Michigan or adjacent place, adjacent state. And he did ground current. And he came here and spent 2 or 3 days. And we went around to various farmers, and he actually, especially along the power lines, because my farm happens to have power lines, and he told them, and we were taking walks from Fargo Road over to the town line. And we weren't near maybe we're as far as that building over there from the power lines. And when he took these measurements, he told us we should never take a walk on our farm. It was too dangerous.
They hum.
And then I remembered that my grandmother, my great-grandmother died early. My grandmother, we were doing dishes, and she dropped on the floor from a stroke. She had her hands in water. And then my mother died in one day from a stroke in that house over there. And after studying this, I realized that it's the power lines. And this is just a typical story for all families that live near power lines. And most people don't know it because they haven't gotten to the age that they're going to be harmed by the electromagnetic energy. And some people get cancer and some people get stroke. Okay, then we had, the Dave Stetzer had been all around Eastern Europe studying physical health and electrical current, especially ground current.
We're alluding to stray voltage, and basically, if you can picture the power lines, there's 4 lines on top, and then there's one line at the bottom, when the power goes through, it has to go back to ground, and the ground has to go back to okay? So if those 4 lines were a sewer line, and they all fed into one small line, what's gonna happen? The sewer's gonna back up, right? And that's what's happening with the bullets. The bullets is going into ground, it's bleeding out of ground, and then it
path of
takes
least
the
resistance.
least path of resistance, which could be in your cellar or down the
Your
road
sink,
or
your
down the
bathroom.
creek, it'll lead wherever it wants to
There are
go.
lines.
And aptly so, Ron alluded to that if there's a solar farm here that's feeding the line, and if that line is at capacity, then you put another farm and surpass that capacity, that's gonna bleed out of the ground, into the ground, and it's gonna go
Every place.
anywhere.
Actually, what I said is that once the line reaches capacity, there won't be any more to go.
But
I didn't make a comment on straight current. One of the things I'm hoping what we'll do is that if you, as we go subject to subject, whether it's stray current, whether it's bleeding off the panels, we have to look at, like any failure mode analysis, because this is for the seeker. We have a law, we require a seeker. Any concerns that you have, that's the point. The seeker is where you bring those up. And you have to look at, does it exist?
right.
Will the development change what is already a pre-existing condition? Good example. Early on, people were concerned, and rightly so, with bleed off from the panels. Now, you can't just test the soil and say, oh, we got a problem. No, you test the soil first, and then you see if there's any change to it. That's,
you look at the background and
we can't have a company be, good example in our law, we say that, what do they call them? After a site's been brownfield sites. Again, a perfect example, you already have an issue there, so that might be a good place to put it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what we need to do is subject by subject. Is it a failure mode that warrants investigation?
I agree.
How do we do that investigation? What is the, is there any mitigation to that? So, and then that's how you complete a seeker. So although we spent a lot of time, trying to place into perspective what our law does. Again, and I'm kind of repeating myself, our law allows for solar development in industrial zones.
Okay, now, I'm going to stop you.
All right, if you would, because we need to get to the
I'm
specifics.
assuming that
Thank
the
you.
variance we were talking about, that little green spot in the middle, that if there was a setback from that, it would kind of ruin the availability of that industrial area.
Or it would,
And I can understand the variance,
yes.
but it makes perfect sense. But to change the law, no, it doesn't make sense to me.
Okay,
That would need some discussion.
so before the law was written, then we had a recommendation that given the information and material in these pages, Solar Study believed that the utility industrial solar facilities are not suitable for our town. And this conclusion was based on the majority vote of 7 committee members. And I want to read the findings. According to New York State 272 General Statute and repeated in the foundation of the comprehensive plan, page 1, gives the local legislators the power to write zoning and regulation ordinances for the purpose of promoting the power to write zoning and regulation ordinances for promoting health, safety, and general welfare of their community. It states while municipals are given the power to regulate land uses in the community, it's understood that these decisions should be based on sound planning principles and not on arbitrary, and those that are arbitrary and capricious. And I think that in working with Steve, we'll be extremely conscious of those things as we go along, I'm going to be learning about the specifics of the seeker, and I'm going to be able to give you our information to back up our recommendations. And 2, we need to follow the comprehensive plan, and then under some circumstances, we were noticing that there were possible benefits to be balanced against the negative impacts to local citizens. I personally didn't care about that particular one because I think the benefits are the benefits to the people of health, safety, and welfare outweigh anything that the state can tell us. But we are run by the state in New York State. Regulation of the siting of installation of solar arrays is necessary for protecting the health, welfare, and safety. Several independent legal and economic experts have concluded that there can be legal and economic downsides for landowners entering into secretive, complicated, and one-sided lease easements and contracts written by the solar company and developers. Large-scale industrial solar facilities represent potential negative aesthetic impacts because of their size, refraction, and placement. That refraction is a huge issue. Installation of these facilities can create drainage problems and erosion and sediment control. Evidence from independent appraisals that industry solar energy facilities can reduce property values. We're very concerned with that one, and I think that's one of the ones that the town board will come back to the town board and they will rule on that. In certain circumstances, it is acknowledged that electromagnetic transits at grid lines produce electricity, which can be detrimental to health and welfare of animals and humans. But we haven't said also that it is detrimental to vegetation and so the crops that the farmers are growing. We had an ornithologist come and say that this is very disadvantageous to birds, and that this is a flyway to the birds of many species, year-round and seasonally. And we talked about the view sheds. We're very concerned with the view sheds, as Lenny had just mentioned. And because of these problematic findings and lack of scientific net benefits, the precautionary principle should dictate the town of Stafford be particularly conservative and cautious in the regulation of industrial solar energy. Stafford has regulated solar energy facilities in the past decade with local laws, but those were for personal use. So I'm going to go on to the precautionary principle. Approach risk states that if an action or policy has suspected risk of causing harm to the public or to the environment in the absence of scientific consensus that the action and policy is not harmful, the burden of proof is that it is not harmful falls on those taking the action. The principle is used by policymakers to justify discretionary decisions in situations where there is a possibility of harm from making a certain decision, taking a particular course of action when extensive scientific knowledge on the matter is lacking. The principle implies that there is a social responsibility to protect the public from exposure to harm when scientific investigation has found a plausible risk. These protections can be relaxed only if further scientific findings emerge that provide sound evidence that no harm will result. And I think that if you think back to what we were speaking about the EPA's findings that were probably very politically put together. The EPA saying that we have to kill off the hockey stick and prevent CO2 from harming us for the rest of our lives and harming everything. That the precautionary principle was never used when making that, and that was from the UN, of course, and they, of course, also had ulterior motivation for where they want the world, all of the countries in the world to go. Now, we've kind of covered what the state laws said. They have the ability to override if certain types of solar comes to town and people begin to sign up. And there's a section in here on all of the New York incentives for renewables. And there's a section on the business of American lobbying, which is like what the UN did with the problem of the findings. They came up with a pretty interesting way of getting control of a great deal of what happens on United States lands. And this is a quarter of an inch or more thick, this particular one. I urge you to come and see this book, and maybe we'll make arrangements for it to be seen in the conference room, but it would have to be monitored, wouldn't it?
No, I'm not sure it doesn't leave a note.
So many have. Okay. The New York State energy plan is, I'm going to just read the points quickly. Reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So right there you see that New York State has decided that they believe in greenhouse gas emissions that are harming all people and living things and so on. And they want to reduce these levels of greenhouse gases by 2030 and 80% from 1990 levels by 2050. And they want 50% renewable energy by 2030. But it's now been proven that CO2 is not a detriment to us. And so this is information that's 4 years old, but the state has not changed or updated their laws or their edicts or any part of what they're doing, what they're putting out to go along with science. They're not interested in science. In my estimation, they're interested in political power. So then we had a copy in here of the comprehensive plan, which is available at the town level. If anybody can just go in, and in that we have a map of the soils and so on in the town, if you're interested in that. And
It's on the website.
And then the next section was questions. We had 2 or 3 pages of questions that we wanted to ask. It was at the time Cypress Creek Renewables, and about their project plan and the proposal to the town of Stafford. But it turned out that they didn't want to answer the questions. But I would like to just go through some of the questions that were asked. And you have to ask yourself, why can't they answer, or why didn't they answer these questions? So why is Cypress interested in Stafford? What are the benefits to solar in Stafford, electricity production plants? What size industrial solar production plant would you place in Stafford? Explain in detail. Why is the size chosen? Please provide a detailed map of your plan. Will you provide a scale or computerized model of your plan? Is there an option to have a smaller project? Will you conduct a study of irradiance and possible output for Stafford? Is there another solar installation that matches the size and geographic area as proposed for the one in Stafford? And if so, could we view it? How many installations will there be in Stafford in all phases? How many, let's see, is there a documented limit for number and size? What is the construction period from start to finish? Where are the solar components manufactured? Well, we all know where that is, don't we? All solar panels, or most all solar panels, some are made in the United States, but most are made in China. By slave labor, actually by people who are intensely controlled and fed and housed. Is there, let's see, provide a bill of sales for these materials. Will Stafford project have its own operations and maintenance, or would it be shared with other projects? Is there a command center for this project? Will the farmland be useful after the installation of the project, the soil compaction, groundwater drainage, ground and stray voltage? What's the output of the abutters? What is the input of the abutters to this project? Will there be a new substation or transmission lines? What is the prep for breakdowns, loose parts, fire, special training equipment, local fire departments, lightning strikes? In case of a breakdown, from where will the repair crews be dispatched? Are there 20-hour hotlines for troubleshooting in the face of plate with phone numbers, on the face of the plates with phone numbers? What is and on and on. I don't know if you're interested in the rest of these, but there are 5 pages of questions that we introduced to Cypress, and they would not answer any of these questions. They refused to answer the questions. Now, what conclusion do you draw from that? And I'll just go to the next section, because you understand that they don't want us to know anything. Just shut up and let us come in. And the way the New York State law is set up, like Ron says, we don't have a lot of...
The only thing I would add to that is that a lot of things that you questioned ended up in the law. And although Cypress was the one prior to your study group, it's BW now.
Yes.
So.
Well, we know that it's BW now. I'm going over what we had at the time.
Yes.
Then this next section is economic statements. And this is most interesting. Solar is intermittent, expensive, and dilute. By dilute, it means you can't depend on it. The sun doesn't shine most of the time, especially in Western New York. And I had the opportunity to call somebody who was at the Heritage at Heartland Institute in Chicago a couple of days ago. His name is Sterling Burnett. And he said, well, tell me where you live. And I said, oh, Buffalo. And he said, oh, well, they have the worst sun and the most cloud cover of any place in New York State. And after the sun is calculated, 1/3 of that may produce an outcome of electricity. And then I laughed because I knew that before, and it killed me that he had a chart right there that he read right off to me. Like, this is ridiculous. This doesn't belong in Western New York.
No.
In Europe, watts per person costs the highest in Germany and Denmark. The availability of measurable sun rays in New York is lower than the national average. Well, now we know it's lower than 2/3 of the rest of the country. It's estimated that 82% of the original investment in solar resources is recouped. In order to break even, the investment of the solar must reside below 35 degrees north parallel, and that's around the lower part of North Carolina. So there's no way to make the money back. So where is the money coming from and where is the money going? But the use of our land is tied up for 20 or an option for another 20, which could be as much as 40 years. And all the people that are really interested, or not all the people, but many of the people that are signing up are less than my age, 60s to 80, and don't want to farm anymore. Solar facilities produce hundreds of a percent of all the energy in the United States in 2017. 800s of a percent. 8 over 800s, 8% of all the electricity. And on, there are many more. I don't want to go through it all. And then there's documentation for all of this. And then this guy, Steve Gorman, gave us a wonderful talk from Chicago, and we did that by way of the internet. Do you remember that one?
He was terrific.
He was terrific, he is terrific, and he's my friend now, and I call him often. But to back up what the last section said, he had these slides, solar in Stafford, possible valid reasons, good business for the solar developer, good business for landowner, good for the citizens of Stafford, ? Good public relations. And he says, solar in Stafford, not valid reasons. To stop dangerous climate change, ridiculous. Climate driven by natural factors, such as the sun. To avoid resource depletion, centuries of hydrocarbons are still and will be available. Centuries of hydrocarbons will be available for us. So we do not need to harness the sun in the, what would I say, backward way, the unsophisticated way of solar panels. Evidence shows renewables raise costs high. We're not going to have lower electricity bills. We're going to have higher electricity bills with this solar. And to create jobs, well, it doesn't create many jobs. The jobs are, when they finish, maybe some of the jobs, the guys come back and spray off the panels when a lot of dirt is distributed because of wind and dampness. So then there's a whole section by University of Buffalo on called the Sunshine Report. And then Steve Gorman also had this section on 3 strikes against wind and solar. And I think I repeated, it's intermittent, it's dilute, and it's expensive. So when you have snow cover, they can't work, and nobody's going to go out there and wipe off all the snow. So in the middle of the winter, they're not going to do that. They're dilute because it's a huge footprint, and solar takes 75 to 100 times more land to create the same amount of energy that would be created. And wind took 200 to 250 times more land. And change in net metering to wholesale prices have to be subsidized. So he has this one illustration that has to do with if you had one car and it starts 99% of the time, and you had another car that starts 1% of the time, like wind energy, like conventional, and the other one is like conventional, the one that starts 99% of the time. Which one are you going to choose? And the answer is, you're going to choose the one that starts all the time. And that's the problem with all of the renewables. They don't start most of the time. So I'm just going to quickly go through the next section. Taxpayer support, is it justified? We're already paying very high rates with our electricity, and this is going to be taxpayer supported by many, if you look at the back of your bill, you see many taxes that you didn't notice in the bill, but if you read it carefully, you can be sick to your stomach. So in addition, we have taxes and everything that relate to our energy. And we have, I've said this before, we have hydrocarbons that many centuries of supply remaining, and we don't have to worry about running out of oil and gas and so on. And this is where you were coming from. And then on
Glad I
BW,
spoke up. I would have never gotten in there.
then I wanted to tell you something more about BW Solar, but I think I told you something about it already. This is the advertisement that's on the internet. BW Solar is focused on the development of solar power generation and energy storage projects, led by experienced management teams that have built and financed some of the first operational solar and storage projects in the world. BW Solar's mission is to play an active role in the energy transition. The energy transition, meaning from regular electricity to the solar electricity. Let's see. And by empowering communities to rely on clean energy. So we don't want to rely on clean energy. We already did that in the 1800s and the 1700s and so on. And we stayed inside our little, and my sister was saying yes, and they used coverlets, and they had a fire on the inside where they cooked, and we don't need to go back to that. It says it's a privately held company. BW Solar has the agility to adapt to the fast-moving regulatory and technological landscape. In other words, they know how to wangle their way into a town and get through the processes to come in. We focus on maximizing development rather than short-term cash flow. Ensuring, of course, if it's short-term cash flow, you get paid up front, and that's the end of it. But this is 20 to 40 years. And then I did find that they are associated with something called the BW Group, which is a private shipping industry. And the name of the founder is Yu Kong Pao. The headquarters is in Singapore and Oslo. The area served is global. Key people are Chairman Andreas Showman Pao. The number of employees they have is 7,000, excuse me. And you can go on the website and read all about it. And they have an overview of their shipping, whatever, and the history and background. They are in the worldwide tanker market for oil. They recently had this acquisition of the Bergens in Norway, and I think that makes them shielded somewhat by the idea that they are from China, because they're going through a lot of their marketing is going through Norway, but it still is. I had a maybe I don't have it in here. Oh. So they have BW Solar, BW Energy, BW Dry Cargo, Hafina, Independent Cruel Tanker Company. They're huge, and these are the documentations. And the point I'm making is this is not a small company, like I said. They said that they were from Ontario, Canada. They never mentioned that they were not just, oh, here is another small list, or two lists in very small print. Our businesses are BW LPG, LNG, BW Epic Cosan, BW Energy, BW Offshore, BW Dry Cargo, Hafina, Navigator Gas, BW Solar, BW Ideal, BW Water, I don't even know, Caldere, Corvus, zero harm, anti-bribery, environmental, anyway, you can look up all this other stuff up. It's amazing. It's one of the biggest companies in the world, and it's coming right downtown in Stafford if we let them. And so next time, if you want to come back next Tuesday, I'll go through the second book, and you'll know a lot more about what the studying and what the information is, and maybe you'll want to take the bull by the horns and come more often to the meetings here, and in a very nice way allow the committees to know what you're thinking. Make sure that you do your homework, and if there's anything I can do to help you with that homework, I'd be very happy to do that. And with that, we weren't going to take any questions, but we can take 5 minutes of questions. I must go home. Is there anybody that has a comment or a question?
Well, one of the things you hit on is that when you were doing the study, you were looking at the possibility of widespread development. What book one really, where do you put book one on moving forward? So we already have a law that says we've looked at some of the risks and this belongs in an industrial zone. This would be for if somebody applies to change agricultural land into industrial, we might want to consider these factors, because of mean we'll have to change our comprehensive plan. So,
well, would you say that the committee or that the town board is open to changing the comprehensive plan? And then would New York State override it?
normally they don't override our comprehensive plans because it's a list of goals. Now, if you deviate from those goals and you don't change the plan, you open yourself up to litigation from both the public and companies. So that's why we steer pretty close to our comprehensive plan.
Didn't we already get a threat from VW that if he didn't get his own way, that they were going to take us to court?
It has been mentioned, I believe 3 times I counted, that they're having a great deal of difficulty with the property protection portion of it. We do have the case, we did put the disclaimer in the law that if one part is found, one part is found unconstitutional or illegal, or any reason to strike it down, the rest of the law stays in place. So you would still have the case of just in industrial zones. Realize what happened here. We had a study committee we put together that includes citizens, and those a good percentage of them were farmers or came from farm families. So I think we represented the agricultural portion very well. They came back with a 7-0 vote against widespread development of solar in our town. We threaded the needle and said, all right, we'll allow development in industrial zones simply because using the old like technology zone. I mean, I think it's an ag zone where you put things in zones. So I think going forward, that's a good place to put it. I think we all agreed on that.
And we think they're going to be there.
What's it?
We think they're going to be there.
We're still working through that. Again, book one is general. I'm hoping that we get the specific issues out of book 2 and include them in their secret. But if you're looking for a, again, book 1 really is the more general issues, book 2 gets down to the specifics. But again, the board was a 7-0 vote from our study committee not to go for widespread development. It was a 5-0 vote on our law to allow development in those zones. So we kind of, you know, you've got a state that will put them anywhere. But on a local level, we thought that was a good compromise.
So do you want to speak to whether or not, under what conditions would you bring in a lawyer, a hotshot lawyer that is, that could help us navigate what we're going to be going through from, with the pressure from the company?
I can't speak for the board on that. I would, you know, if we get involved in litigation, naturally we're going to have to get a lawyer comparable to litigation. Our lawyer, even on local issues, has said that he's really not interested in doing litigations. That's why on the zoning issues, we were looking at the firm out of Warsaw to handle that portion of it.
So our lawyer, his father is the lawyer for the Byron Virgin area, and so we really wouldn't want to be using him.
I was surprised to see the town of Batavia was going gung-ho with putting solar in the town.
The last I
So they
heard,
came to screeching
the
stop.
town supervisor of the town of Batavia said this is the most horrible mistake he ever made,
But
They
again,
don't get a dime on it.
and they don't get a dime out of it.
but again, we looked at, you know, you've got a balance between what our citizens want, what our citizens that may develop their land may want, what the state is pushing, what the legal environment is, and try to put together a law that...
To amend the law?
No, I don't have any plan. I myself...
No, I didn't. You said put together a law.
We put together our
Oh,
solar law.
I'm sorry. I thought that you were speaking
No.
in future tense.
But, again, especially with zoning, everything's amendable. I think that's the one big message I want to get out here, is that when it comes to zoning, you have to be open to change, you have to be open to amendments, you have to be open to people who may have a hardship. That's the root of zoning.
So we have to define hardship. And I want to say to Steve, I'll be looking forward to working with you, and I cannot stay any longer. And I look forward to seeing people here next Tuesday night. We'll go over the second part, which is really very informational.
Thank you, Sandy.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Since this is a town board meeting, is there a motion to adjourn at 8:58?
Well, are there any other questions? Yeah, I mean, Sandy has to go. But if there are any questions for the board that you have?
If we get a few questions, can we bring them next Tuesday?
Yes, and may I say that it would be nice if everybody brought somebody else.
Bring your neighbors.
Bring your neighbors. I mean, it's our responsibility as citizens of the town to get people involved. And we don't do that very well. And we're here tonight and we realize how serious this is. And it would be great if you could bring at least one other person with you. Somebody that doesn't know that much about it, but you think might. Or just a neighbor to accompany you. And with that, I will see you next week, I hope. And thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, motion.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.